Good morning to all attending the RTA's meeting of the Board of Directors. I want to review a couple of guidelines for our meeting. For those members who are here in person, first of all, thank you, as always, for your great attendance. Please turn off your microphones when you are finished speaking. If you wish to speak, use the wait till a little green light goes on. You know the drill. For those calling in remotely, there's a couple of you today, keep your audio on mute as much as possible to minimize background noise because we do record these. And when you have a question or comment, please raise your virtual hand and the board secretary will call on board members who have raised their hands one at a time. When she calls on you, try to remember, if you can, I'm not the best at that always, to unmute before you begin speaking and lower your hand when you're finished. With that said, I will now officially call the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation Authority to order. And will everybody in the room please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Secretary, can you please call the roll?
Good morning, everyone. Director Carey? Here. Director Colson? Director Gathing? Director Gorman? Here. Director Groven?
Here.
Director Jenkins? Director Qatar?
Here.
Director Lewis?
Here.
Director Mondero?
Yes.
Director Pang? I know she's on. Director Pang?
Here.
Director Rotondo?
Here.
Director Ross? Director Ryan?
Here.
Director Sager? Director Yonan?
Here.
And Chairman Dillard.
Present.
We have 13 present.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now that we've established we have a physical quorum, our board secretary has received completed notice from directors Colson, Gaving, and Pang indicating they cannot attend in person. And pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, they are deemed admitted unless there's a motion against it. Anybody against letting the three of them come in remotely? Hearing none, those directors, Madam Secretary, may participate remotely. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes from the board meeting, which was held on March 27th of 2025. Any comments or corrections to these minutes? Seeing none, how about a motion and a second? We approved, moved by Director J.D. Ross, seconded by Director Michael Lewis. And Madam Secretary, please take a roll on the approval of the minutes from March 27th.
Director Carey?
Aye.
Director Colson? Director Gathing? Director Gorman? Aye. Director Groven?
Aye.
Director Jenkins? Director Qatar?
Aye.
Director Lewis?
Aye.
Director Mondero?
Yes.
Director Pang?
Yes.
Director Rotondo?
Yes.
Director Ross?
Yes.
Director Ryan?
Yes.
Director Sager?
Yes.
Director Yonan?
Yes.
And Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
13 ayes.
Thank you. Those minutes are approved. Item 4 is the public comment segment of the meeting. Any comments received will now be read into the record by the board secretary. Is there did we receive any?
We have not received any
We
written
have
comments.
received none. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak today? Always nervous when I ask that question. Seeing none, we will move on. Item 5 is the Executive Director's Report. Leanne Redden, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Dillard and board members. I have a brief report and then we'll get on to the rest of the agenda. It has still been a busy month and you're going to hear several updates from staff in a few moments about what they've been working on, including a recap of the transit summit that we held on Tuesday. Myself, I was at the American Public Transportation Association conference this past week, the weekend before, and for a couple of days early in that week. I actually hosted and closed the plenary session for the conference but was also a panelist on that and was able to speak to not just the role, the value, and the economic impacts of the transit system, but also very specifically about the messaging that we have been doing and the great work our team has been doing on sort of telling the story about transit and its importance to both the economy and our region as a whole. These kinds of conferences really do continue to be kind of a valuable opportunity for us not to just share our story, but learn from our peers and get feedback and build those relationships as we're all sort of struggling through some of these challenging times. A quick calendar note that I want to highlight that our community planning call for projects has now closed. But this Section 5310 program, which is a program of federal funding for focus on people with disabilities and the elderly. That program is still open for submittals and closes on April 24. All the details, deadlines, et cetera, are available on the RTA's website. So next slide, please. So as usual, you're going to hear from Rob Nash on all things Springfield, both at the state and local legislative update. So I'm just going to focus on the federal information. Earlier this month, Congress approved a budget blueprint that allows members to begin the process of drafting legislation that'll address key domestic policy priorities, including spending cuts in several areas. A passage of an identical framework in both the House and Senate will allow essentially for that legislation to move forward under what they call the reconciliation process, which only requires a simple majority for final approval in the Senate. The RTA has continued conversations with our congressional delegation as that work is progressing. And staff will continue our outreach, not just with our delegation, but will continue. APTA hosts a series of meetings in April in Washington, D.C. We will participate in that with our peers around the country, where we not only sort of meet and collectively strategize, but we also kind of flood the hill on the role, the value, the importance of public transportation. The House Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on Highways and Transit held a subject matter hearing titled America Builds, a review of our nation's transit policies and programs. Representatives from APTA, rural transit agencies, organized labor, contracted services, and policy think tank members testified at that hearing. Members of Congress asked the industry for priorities as the next surface transportation bill is being developed over the next year. And witnesses there emphasized the need to protect and grow investment in public transit to support economy locally and nationally. And we'll continue to work with that team. And as we talked about at the last month's meeting, share with you what our specific items are related to that agenda, and we will continue to work on that. Finally, on April 3rd, the Senate Banking, House, and Urban Affairs Committee advanced the nomination of Mark Molinaro to be the next federal transit administrator. They made the recommendation to advance it to the full Senate for their consideration. There currently is no scheduled vote for that confirmation, but the sense is that that will proceed and move ahead. I can share with you that several of my peers around the country have had lengthy conversations with Mr. Molinaro, coming from a local government perspective and local government and understanding how things work and how things just have to get done. And is a supporter of public transportation, specifically also ADA paratransits, and thinking about sort of mobility and accessibility across our regions is really personally critical for him. So I think that there is I think we're happy to see that nomination move forward. All right, and then just to wrap up, next slide, and then I will be done. After this, you're going to hear an update on the implementation of Transit is the Answer, and then following that, a presentation on the current American with Disabilities Act paratransit funding shortfall, so our ADA shortfall that we're experiencing in this region on our services. and then a little bit of discussion around next steps on that issue. We will then ask for your votes on one ordinance authorizing long-term borrowing and on reimbursement of travel expenses. So with that, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Leanne. Questions? Director Lewis.
Leanne, just a quick question, if you know, Mr. Molinar's background, it seems favorable, but what was his prior?
He was I think it was a county or a city executive, so he's worked on city government before. He did a stint as a US representative before looking for this role now. So he has had, he understands the business of government, if you will, and what it takes to get things moving and working. And so I think that there's been positive feedback from the discussions that not myself personally, but several of my peers have had with him. He actually reached out proactively before his hearing to better learn and hear from people on the ground about what are some of the transit issues that, we're all facing. And so I think that, if nothing else, is a great sign that he does want to truly understand what some of the issues are and how can he support and serve.
So, any other questions or comments? All right, let's move on to 6A, which is the Transit is the Answer update. I see Kyle coming up. Good morning, team. Kyle, it's all yours.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. Kyle Whitehead from the RTA Government Affairs team. I was the project manager for Tuesday's Transforming Transit Summit, which we'll talk about in just a second. So today's presentation will start with a recap of that event, and then Tina will share more information about the Save Transit Now campaign and call to action that kicked off this week. Then Peter will share a summary of results from our recent rider survey, and Rob will provide an update on legislative outreach and activity. We'll close with Sarah sharing the latest financial results. Next slide. Work continues across the agency to engage with riders, the public, our partners, and stakeholders to continue to grow our coalition and build upon the value that transit brings to our region and the communities we serve. Next slide. Tuesday's summit was a successful event before a diverse audience of about 200 people, including state legislators, transportation and transit agency leaders, peer agencies, local officials, riders, and more. Attendees heard from Senate Transportation Committee Chair Ram Villavallen, and then Leanne spoke with WTTW's Nick Blumberg about the future of the system if we are successful in securing $1.5 billion in new operating funding. Leanne also moderated a panel with each of the service board executive directors, talking about how their services could improve with sustainable funding. Randy Clark, the CEO of WMATA in Washington, D.C., and Andrew Vermeer, the head of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission in the Bay Area, spoke about how their regions are facing similar challenges and what we can learn from one another. We also had interactive sessions where attendees could provide feedback and ask questions about various RTA, CTA, Metra, and PACE initiatives. The event featured a call to action for participants to contact their legislators, urging them to support sustainable transit funding. This call to action will be the focus of the campaign that Tina will talk about next, so I'll pass it off to her.
Thanks, Kyle. My name's Tina Fassett-Smith. I'm the Director of Communications here. I have a cold, so sorry if I'm coffee. I'm going to provide a brief overview of the funding advocacy campaign, the Save Transit Now campaign that begins today. Our goal since January has been to keep the public informed about the fiscal cliff, our vision for the future of the transit system, and what's at stake if the legislature fails to act. Ultimately, we want to continue the effort we began with Transit is the Answer, to engage as many residents as possible in improving the system for everyone. This began with our launch of Transforming Transit at the City Club in January. It continued with the media coverage for what 40% in service cuts would mean for the region. And today we begin to engage the broadest audience yet, the entire region, in a campaign that allows anyone to easily contact their legislator by sending them an email about saving transit. Our early research, which included focus groups that we held both in the suburbs and in the city, indicated that not many were familiar with the fiscal cliff, and the urgent financial needs of the system. Particularly, this was true of people living outside the city of Chicago. So our goal for this campaign is to raise awareness and to motivate people to contact their legislator about the positive impact transit has had on their lives and in their communities, and why it needs to be sustainably funded. I'm going to walk you through the ads and the media strategy. So next slide, please. TV and radio are still the most effective ways to reach people, and so that's where a bulk of our spending will go for this campaign. We have created 30-second and 15-second TV spots that will appear on regular broadcast channels during popular shows like morning and evening news and late night talk shows. We've also purchased space in cable news and on streaming networks. The same ads will appear as 30 and 15-second ads on radio during peak drive times and weekends. Next slide. So I'm going to play the 30-second TV ad here. Just know that this audio is also the 30-second radio ad, and this ad has been cut into 2 different 15-second ads that will also appear on TV, radio, and social. You can go ahead and play.
Our transit system is at a crossroads. If state legislators fully fund transit by the summer, we can cut wait times nearly in half, have safer, cleaner rides, and make transit better than ever. But if they ignore transit's funding crisis, we will face 40% service cuts that will make rides overcrowded and make congestion unbearable. We can't afford to be stuck in traffic. Tell your legislator at savetransitnow.org.
You can go to the next slide. So we've also purchased digital billboard space in 8 locations across the region. Here, obviously, the focus is the idea of increased congestion as the motivating message to get drivers to take action. Next slide. To make sure we're communicating directly with riders, we have placements at CTA and PACE bus shelters and at Metro stations within every single line of Metro on vehicles and in stations, including at Ogilvie, Millennium, and LaSalle stations as well. Go ahead to the next slide. Readers will see ads in the region's 3 major daily newspapers, the Tribune, Sun-Times, and Daily Herald, both in print and digital editions and in newsletters between now and the end of May. Paid social and Spanish language ads on all platforms, including radio and TV, round out the campaign. Just note, too, that if the legislative session continues past the end of May, we're prepared to continue the campaign until the session is over. Next slide. When users go to Save Transit Now or use the QR codes in the ads, they'll be able to enter their address and read through a pre-written letter to their legislator. The letter is editable, and it's available to all users in English and Spanish. Most importantly, the letter is short. It calls for $1.5 billion in sustainable funding and a stronger RTA as set forth in Transforming Transit. That users' legislators will receive these letters via email, and we're provided with analytics that allow us to measure the effectiveness of the campaign. We look forward to bringing you more information in weeks to come, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about this before we go on to the next section of this update.
Any questions? Yes, Director Gorman.
Thank you for that, Tina. That was very, very well thought out, obviously. So when you said you purchased all the, the 6 broadcast stations, and all that buy time, when does that start?
It starts this morning. So I was going to ask, actually, has anyone heard it? I know the chairman heard it on
I've
Monday.
actually seen it the last couple of days during the Today Show.
And
So-
I heard, Joey, you heard it this morning. Anybody else? Well, it starts today. It's so, as is usual with a multi-week campaign, what they do is heavy up in the beginning. So there'll be a lot this week and next week, and then it'll die down a little bit, still steady, but more on social, and then it'll rise back up at the near the end of the legislative session. The good thing is that the media purchase we've made is really flexible. So say there's something that we need legislators to do, we can kind of turn the knob a little bit.
Great. And then will that be on the website too?
Oh, yeah, yes.
So it's already on the website
Yes.
and whatnot?
I should add that, I'm sorry, Leanne. Oh, I should add that PACE and Metro are both contributing media buys to this as well.
Wonderful. And then the letter that's pre-drafted and whatnot, So it's a pre-drafted letter. I didn't get a chance to see it before. Is there any suggestions on like how to get this funding? It's like, yeah, find the funding, but it's just like, we support it and find it, but,
One of the things we thought was important was to make the letter really short, right? So
Okay.
people could like skim it
right.
and make sure that they knew what they were sending. So it's pretty short. It asks for the funding and for a stronger RTA.
Okay, all righty, thank you.
And Director, I just literally did it right now. Took me about 25 seconds to send it to my successor. So we'll see if she answers. And she's been wonderful. And she's a member of the Transportation Committee. And my new state rep, who was at our RTA summit, Marty Deuter from Elmhurst. So do it. It's quick, but having had these, Liz, and you've a former commissioner, what I would look at is just how many people wrote me. I mean, I would be looking for sheer volume, obviously answering all my constituents. And the message is, that's all our jobs and Rob Nash's job. So they understand, I think almost all the legislators today understand there's a fiscal cliff. But it's just, I want them to hear from people, that this is really critical. Tina, the ads are great. And Kyle, and to all of you, all of the staff that's here, and those of you who attended, that summit was phenomenal again, and I cannot tell you how good the presenters were, from Washington DC and the San Francisco area. They were magnificent. They really, really helped us. As Tina told me as I was leaving the cultural center, wow, we got some really good clips of nobody's a competitor in the public transportation field, but of other cities' administrators saying wonderful things about us. But they gave us some great suggestions, and gave us some real good footage. But you guys did a great job. That's the third RTA summit we've had. The first was on safety, and I was the closing remarks, reiterated what came out of some of the safety suggestions. The second was in Arlington Heights, so it was a suburban one, was on interconnectivity and how we have a great, probably the best in America, hub and spoke system, but how we do a better job on interconnectivity. And this one really kind of focused on what we would do with $1.5 billion and what would be the consequences if we don't get any relief on the fiscal cliff. But these summits are great. They're a ton of work. I really want you to know I appreciate how much work it takes to do that. But the summits are professional, they're flawless. The input is magnificent, including input, which is the most important input we get. And we're going to hear about it in a second with the writer survey from Peter. But, the input's been phenomenal from those summits, which has been great. Because we do get, is the question, Rob Mash has heard it many times, and so has Leanne, do you know who your writers are from state legislators? And I always like to say, yes, we do know who our writers are. And one of the reasons is we survey them constantly and have data, but we listen very well. So thank you. You all did a magnificent, magnificent job. Any questions or comments? Yes. And Joey, Madam Secretary, add Director Jenkins to the role. Natasha, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman. I think this is wonderful. I think it speaks volumes to have this sort of innovative campaign. I'm very happy to see this. I was just wondering, with the digital billboards, is there the ability to change messaging, or is this the only rollout that we're going to have with this one?
No, that is a key part of our strategy, is to make sure that as much of the ads are as possible are digital, and we can pivot both in the letter and in the ads themselves should we have to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ross.
Can you tell me if you've reached out to any local radio stations in addition to the ones that you had on the board there? I know every county probably has at least one local radio station that gets its fair share of market.
It's funny that you ask, because I literally just got an email from a local radio ad buyer who was like, hey, I heard your ad. You should buy for ours. So as I get those, I'll send them on. We have a media strategy company And really, we had a limited budget for this, and what we needed to look at was how do we reach the maximum number of registered voters? That's what our goal was. So as I get more ideas, I can send our media strategy folks those ideas and say, do we have the budget to do this? So any suggestions that any of you have, I can continue to do that.
Well, I could tell you that in Joliet, there's a morning radio show, and he's often looking for guests to come on. Probably would entertain having someone from the staff, come on and talk about the issues.
Thanks for the suggestion.
Or even better, Director Ross. I've been on
There you
that
go.
show.
I was just thinking the
It's a
same
great
thing.
show. WJOL, the voice of Illinois and the voice of reason.
Yeah, I'd be happy to join you, but
I would literally offer him up as a guest. He would do better than anybody we could have. Is to have JD, who's a respected figure, as most of you are in your home areas. Great suggestion.
and a
Director.
final question. Will we be using the buses and trains to advertise also?
Yes, PACE is in the process of printing in-vehicle ads. We've got station print ads. We will be in every single line on Metra. So I expect as the next couple, maybe it won't be there today, but as the next week or two, you'll start to see them across stations and in vehicles.
That's great. Director Lewis.
Mr. Chairman, it's more of a comment than a question. I just happened yesterday, Jill and Leanne had directed me to the letter site because I've had difficulty catching up with some of my reps because they've been in Springfield and wanting to get before them to talk about some of these issues has been difficult. So that letter is a great asset. Is it customizable? Can I actually make okay. And so I think that, there's 16 of us. It'd be great if all 16, everybody has to make their own individual choice, but it'd be great if they heard from all 16 of us, because that would send a powerful message about the support that this board has for transit reform. So just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, I'll just note that there's a edit button right at the bottom, and you can customize it. You can erase what's in there, write your own. You can change whatever you want about it.
And I'll just offer if any of you actually want to write even more than just that kind of a letter to your members, your reps, reach out to any of us on the government affairs team or the comms team or myself, and we can even give you some more thorough talking points if you wanted to utilize that.
Director Mondero. Good morning,
Thank you,
miss.
Mr. Chairman. First, I want to compliment Executive Director Redden, Kyle, and the team for Chef's Kiss, a great summit. I was able to attend part of it, and it was very impressive. Your presentation here regarding this Save Transit Now, I see that it says signage on Metro and Pace, but it omits CTA, and I'm wondering what efforts are for CTA. And what I think it'd be great is like, can you get a push notification on everyone's Ventra so that like when I open up my Ventra this morning, it'll say, hey, fill it in for the legislator, and then I can do it. All the riders can like fill it in while they're doing their commute. So thank you.
That is an amazing suggestion. And actually, we have made those requests of CTA. They have not gotten back to us yet. So if there's any conversations you can have to help move that along, it's split amongst several departments at CTA to get that kind of green light. I have talked with Nora Learson, the acting president, several times, but we just don't have an answer yet. So we do want to mobilize. It is a captive audience. You're exactly right. The Ventra database is a goldmine in this space, and we would really like to leverage it.
Director Gorman.
No, just wrapping up but that website is great. And thanks so much for saying, because it really was quick. Because while you were talking, I was able
That's
to
really
send it
fast.
to the legislature and, follow up on how great that website is and share just that quick commercial to a legislator and their staff.
Awesome. Yeah, it's any of our social media sites, the RTA social media sites, you can find a post this afternoon to share on your own if you do that. I just want to thank Kyle and Melissa, who's in the back of the room, who did tons of user testing on this over the weekend to make sure legislators were receiving it without any kind of hiccups. So it was a lot of people working to make sure that worked well.
And if I can do it, anybody can. So I'm not a social media person. Thank you.
Just one real quick.
Yes.
I just
Director
wanted
Jenkins.
to add to the list, if you could talk to the campaign person, WVON. I don't know if you've already tapped in, but that's a really good messaging for Cook County and the city.
Okay,
voters
thanks for the
that are
note.
in the city.
Yeah, VON would be great. important when we talk about, do you know who your riders are and what they listen to? Right?
Where I
That would
was
be,
getting
that
at.
would be
Yes,
a
exactly where I was-
key radio station.
Yep.
Any other thing here? Peter, you next.
Good morning. Go ahead to the next slide. My name is Peter Kirsten. I'm the Manager of Strategy and Policy, providing a project update from the planning group. And if you want to go ahead to the next slide. So dating back to 2021, the RTA has been conducting a quarterly panel survey, seeking feedback from thousands of riders every quarter. Initially, this was a tool to kind of get quick and timely rider data during the pandemic to better understand what riders were experiencing on the system. The panel nature, where a consistent set of riders respond each quarter, is also a unique tool for tracking responses over time and understanding how perceptions are changing. So today I'm sharing results from the winter 2025 panel. This panel consists of thousands of riders representing all modes and geographies across the region. We generally receive between 1,400 and 2,000 responses with each survey. The Q1 survey was open from March 3rd to 17th, available in English, digital-only format, and sent out via email. Each quarter, we ask the same questions on customer satisfaction, public safety, and service quality. And then we cover additionally a special topic each quarter, asking this time about funding and reform. Next slide. So we'll go into a little bit of detail here, but in summary, kind of high level findings, regional riders have high levels of satisfaction. So we scored 70% or higher on 3 key metrics that we survey. Public safety remains a challenge, both in terms of what makes people feel safe and in terms of what they actually experience on the system. Transit, where and when a person needs to travel and getting to their destination on time, or put another way, speed, frequency, reliability are the most important to riders. They also score the highest in service quality satisfaction levels on our system. And then lastly, regional riders want to see more funding for transit to increase service, to even add new services to our regional system. And they rank these things higher than reforms or consolidation and when pulled on this. And we'll provide more on that in a moment. Next slide. So first, the survey is really meant to capture this concept of the regional rider, one system with 3 service boards. So just again, to kind of remind people, half of regional riders use CTA bus as their primary mode, 35% CTA rail would be their primary mode, and then Metro and Pace are about 10 and 5% respectively. Over the past months, with help from CTA, we've recruited additional panel members to better capture representativeness of ridership. All of the slides that follow will reflect a weighting that you see on screen here. So we're weighting the response to reflect actual ridership on the system. Next slide. So the panel survey asks 3 questions on satisfaction. How satisfied are you with the value of service considering the fare paid? How likely are you to recommend transit services? And overall, how satisfied are you with Chicago Public Area Transit? Respondents rate their satisfaction on a 10-point scale that you can see on screen here, 1 being low or low satisfaction, low likelihood, and then 10 being high satisfaction. We summarize responses showing the percentage responding with a score of 6 or higher. And here we see positive results. 80.4% of regional riders are satisfied with the value of service considering what they pay to ride the fare. 78.9% of regional riders would recommend transit to others. And 70.9% of regional riders are overall satisfied with the Chicago area public transit system. Next slide. So moving to the next topic of public safety, it's important to look both at what makes people feel safe, more or less safe, versus what they actually experience on the system. So unsurprisingly, significant disturbances on the system, robbery, assault, harassment, by a wide margin, make people feel the most unsafe. Substance use on transit, smoking, and drinking also make people feel unsafe, and even much more so than damaged vehicles or facilities, the presence of unhoused individuals, using transit as a shelter, or less significant disturbances such as noise. Go ahead to the next slide. So then looking at what riders experience, so the previous slide was what makes how they feel. This is what they actually encounter. Far fewer people have experienced significant disturbances on the system, although the number is still relatively high. Additionally, significant disturbances appear to get considerable media attention, as the majority of riders have heard about disturbances via traditional media. By a wide margin, riders have witnessed all of the other instances that we asked about: smoking and alcohol use, using a vehicle as temporary housing or shelter, noise or less serious disturbance, and damage and dirty vehicles and facilities. So while responding to some of these concerns is sometimes out of transit agencies' direct control, focused missions on lowering smoking and drug use on transit can help change kind of the negative impacts that people are experiencing. Go ahead to the next slide. So then lastly, looking kind of longitudinally, the vast majority of riders have not changed their perception on public transit in the previous 3 months. About 10 say it's improved, while just under 20 think it has worsened. And again, we're going to continue to monitor these questions and this topic and can show how this changes over time. Next slide. So then looking next at service quality, respondents were asked to score satisfaction on a variety of service topic areas. Once again, we're showing the percentage of responses that are 6 or higher on a 10-point scale. 75% of riders are satisfied with the service of when and where they need to go. So you can think of that as kind of your speed and frequency measure. 71% of riders are satisfied with reliability, getting there on time. 69% of riders are satisfied with the frontline agency staff that they encounter when riding. 58% satisfied with real-time information. 57, the majority of riders are satisfied with personal safety and security on board. And 53% are satisfied with the system cleanliness. Go ahead to the next slide. So then looking at what matters most to riders in terms of service, here respondents are ranking their top 3 priorities. Consistently, survey data shows that what is most important to riders is fast and reliable service that comes through clearly in the top 2 ranked response: service when and where you need to go and getting there on time. Personal safety, real-time information, cleanliness, and staff round out the ranked priorities. Go ahead to the next slide. So finally, looking at special topics in this wave of funding and reform, the survey took place prior to the March board meeting, where a lot of information obviously was shared publicly about the fiscal cliff, potential cuts or eliminations to service that could be needed. So again, this reflects before that. So while over half of respondents know something about the fiscal cliff, just under 20% have been following closely. And again, these are riders of the system, not the general public, so you'd hope a more informed audience. These results kind of confirm what Tina mentioned earlier in regards to the need to increase awareness of the fiscal cliff. Many riders and residents just are not familiar with the system's urgent financial needs, particularly people who live outside of the city of Chicago. So we intend to ask this question again in Q2 and kind of use that as a benchmark to see how this is changing in real time. Next slide. Finally, looking at reform. So respondents were asked here to rank their top 3 options from a list that would have the most significant impact on creating the best system of our region. And here again, the response is clear. More funding for transit on par with roadways. Growing new service with more RTA oversight, more frequency of service offered in off-peak, and then better coordination between the 3 service boards, all ranked the highest. Consolidated fare payment, transparency, consolidated customer info came in last. So again, our funding and reform proposals in many ways align directly with what riders say when they're asked about where our priority should be for making the most significant impact. Next slide. So the spring quarterly survey is going to happen in early May for the Q2 quarter. We'll ask again about satisfaction, public safety, and service quality, and include some more on special topics. Our intention is to eventually incorporate survey results into a dashboard, making it easy to track changes in sentiment over time in the same way that we track other key measures. And then separately, the system-wide customer satisfaction survey findings will be released later this spring or early summer. As a reminder, and for newer board members, biannually, the RTA and service boards conduct a system-wide survey of tens of thousands of riders. This is a much bigger effort. It uses digital and onboard methods. You'll hear it referred to as the CSS. This is critical data source and is necessary for things like Title VI analysis. So that survey just completed actually last week. There will be a full report of findings and a board summary in the coming months. That'll be an important benchmark for us to use to kind of continue to refine the panel survey as well. So happy to pause there for any questions.
Any questions? Dr. Sauer?
Yes, I appreciate the report, and I appreciate the hard work that you all have gone through, and I appreciate the analysis that has been presented. I just have a question about the population. You have a 1,340 population, more or less, right? And you are going to be going back out again. Are you going to use the same population? They're going to continue, so it's going to be these same individual participants in the survey that goes out in May as well.
So that's the idea behind a panel. It's a much bigger number of people that are given the opportunity to respond, and then we usually get about 1,400 responses, or 1,400 to 2,000. But we recruit people actively to the panel. So CTA has provided a number of people using Ventra data to kind of better weight the panel to what ridership looks like. With each wave, we're continuing to kind of modify that, but it is a set number of emails that we have that the survey goes out to each quarter.
The question I have about the population then is what percentage are from the collar counties versus the city?
I can't answer on terms of collar county specifically versus city, but we break it out a number of different ways, and I can follow up with more detail on that and actually lay it out on a map to show representation throughout the entire 6-county region.
Be interesting. Thank you.
But I will say one thing that they've worked very hard at is making sure that there is representation across the entire region. And actually, I think historically, it might have even been weighted more to the suburbs than the city years back. And we've been working over time to actually make sure it's more representative of the entire region. The other point I just want to note is that this is sort of supplemental to the broader customer survey work that we as a region do with the service boards on a sort of a less frequent basis, and they're bigger, but this is a way to sort of just have this touch point over a period of time that's comparable, with more frequent turnaround, I guess, if you will, than some of the bigger studies that we do collectively.
Thank you, Lane. Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions? Yes, Director Gotard.
First, big thanks for the summit. I was able to attend, and job well done. And there's a little bit of jealousy in the WMATA DC CEO who won the International Cleanliness Award. Didn't know there was one, but certainly would like to get that for us here. The question on trends, it was good to hear that you're putting that on the dashboard, and if there's anything you can produce for us at the board on those trends, particularly on safety, before that dashboard comes, both using that biannual and your quarterly panel, I think that could offer some interesting insights. And then the second question is particularly on cleanliness, how do we measure that? So, this is clearly these numbers are very high. What are good ways for us to figure out whether or not the service is meeting, a clean standard? Is there a metric that makes sense for us to track in addition to just, people feel clean or it feels that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And many things, public safety, service quality, cleanliness, and the way people feel about it on transit have changed really rapidly in the last couple of years. And the survey, one of the things that we're trying to unpack here is how that has changed, how that sentiment has looked different. So I think, an important thing for us to do would follow up with agencies that are clearly getting it right. WMATA would be one on the cleanliness, and ask, how are you surveying people? How are you unpacking this information? Because again, I think it is just kind of a reflection of the time of how fast this is changing, that we need to continue to update the ways that we're asking. In terms of what we're doing, I mean, the questions on the slide are the way we ask that question. And you know, it is always a challenge to think about the best way to ask it, make sure people interpret the question the same way, to ensure that you're getting a response that is reasonable and that, you know, accurately represents their perception. So we can follow up on it and find out what more we find out. But it's something we're working on continually.
Director Carey.
I have a couple questions. Following up on Director Sager's question about city versus suburbs. If your stats about what was their primary mode of transportation, 85% is CTA and 9 is Metro and 5 is Pace. That would seem to be, assuming that CTA is primarily the city, it seemed to be that it would be heavily skewed towards the city then, wouldn't it?
I mean, again, we are weighting the survey response to where there are the most riders, and CTA is the lion's share of the riders.
Okay, okay.
CTA operates primarily in the city. They serve quite a few Cook County
And
suburbs as
I
well.
understand that, right, right.
Yeah.
So, but you are actively trying to get more Metro, more Pace.
Yeah, unweighted results would actually show a disproportionate Metra
Okay.
ridership. Again, kind of reflecting Leanne's previous comment. Historically, we've had better success recruiting members of the panel from suburban communities.
I get it.
And we're actually kind of trying to get a bigger city response to, again, be more representative of ridership.
Okay, and thank you. I understand that a little bit better. And then looking at the, you know, their priorities, their response on public safety and cleanliness, is that broken down by service bureau, or is like when you do the dashboarding? Will you
Yeah.
look at that way?
So getting into that kind of granularity, really the CSS is a better tool for that because it's so much bigger. A hired statistician will certify that that sample is representative for each service board. Again, this is approved by the FTA. It's used for Title VI and other things. We have the ability to kind of crosstab response in that way. But particularly for Metro and Pace, like the number of people that would then be in the sample gets very small. So you really need to be careful with crosstabbing in a panel of this size. One way you could do it is crosstab by bus and rail and kind of mix CTA bus and Pace bus, Metro and CTA rail. But again, that you're going to have two different responses there. So we have the ability to do it. We generally only will present the findings for the full region because that's kind of how it's intended to work.
Okay.
But if we encounter things, we can share those.
And I know that the service bureaus do their own survey, which we see at a more granular level. So
Right.
I should be looking at this as kind of a very high level sort of view of the whole system.
Right. Again,
okay.
that kind of first slide about this concept of a regional rider. It's not necessarily a person that rides all three service boards.
Okay.
It's really a combination of a lot of riders on CTA, people on Metro and Pace. You know, there are instances of people obviously transferring between all three as well. But yeah, the regional rider concept is the panel.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat and Peter. Other questions along this line? All right, let's move on to Sarah. You have more, Peter? You're finished, right? Rob, you next?
I'm happy to defer if you'd like me to. I can. Thanks. Good morning. I'm Rob Nash, Director of Government Affairs. I want to just provide an update on where we are in the legislative session and look ahead toward the end of that session. Obviously, a critical period as we're working to finalize reform and funding proposals. Next slide, please. Building on the public engagement efforts that Tina previewed for you, and building on conversations that have begun in earnest in Springfield on proposed legislative language offered by various stakeholders, including advocates, labor, the business community, local elected officials, and of course, the transit system. We continue to have conversations on both, I'll sort of term them the two buckets of reform and structural change and funding in the General Assembly. The labor proposal that we've talked a little bit about will have a subject matter hearing next week in Springfield. And the following week, we have been invited along with the service boards to have a series of meetings with members, I should call it, to review improvements to the service made possible by the potential $1.5 billion investment. Put it another way, we're going to try and localize some of the impacts of these, the potential investment and how it improves service in particular districts, hopefully down to the level of individual routes, to give lawmakers a sense of, what the upside is. I think we have been successful in, and will continue to highlight the tremendous consequences of inaction. But we also want to start, defining what the upside is if we choose to make an investment in the system. As you see up at top, there's a couple of key dates that we're dealing with. We're entering a legislative spring break, where we'll have a few weeks off in the Senate, one in the House, some various deadlines coming forward in the General Assembly session. I will just note that this issue is likely to be dealt with again very late in the game, and so there will be various sort of procedural maneuvers to keep pending legislation alive to deal with the issue. And finally, the scheduled session adjournment date is May 31st, and I do not think that at this point we've heard any indication that there's any appetite to go beyond that date. So we do believe that we're coming to that conclusion at the end of next month. I'm happy to answer any questions and get into any more detail before I hand it off to Sarah for some of the financial review.
Questions? Dr. Sagar.
First, Rob, I want to thank you and everyone who's involved in the significant efforts that have been made with regards to proposed legislative amendments. I think your outreach to the various larger communities has been outstanding, and I just want to thank you and the team for that. Second thing is that I appreciate very much the proposed amendments that we have had a chance to review. And I want to ask Chairman first if it's appropriate for us to talk a little bit about that. Do you want to talk about that, or would you prefer not to talk about that?
Up to you.
I think we're happy to answer any question that you have. Obviously, some of the conversations in Springfield, I think there's a general acknowledgement we're trying to work in good faith on some of the comments back and forth, but happy to talk about how we're approaching transforming transit in the reform language.
All right. Well, if you don't mind, I'll kind of jump into some of that language, and we'll go from there. And you can tell me to be quiet if you want me to do that. Okay. What I saw, 129-page document, I think it was, of amendments, and I think most of us had a chance to read those, and I trust that everybody did. And I just want to commend you and the team, because I know that it's a significant effort to kind of work your way through that and to be thoughtful and mindful of what types of amendments need to be made in terms of the larger goals that we have, I think, and then be consistent throughout that document or the document to make sure that we're not being, talking in different ways in different parts of the legislation. So I'm really grateful for that effort to be consistent and to make sure that we're not creating problems for ourselves in the future. I guess the thing that I want to make sure that I kind of understand, and I believe that it's a proper progression, if you will, but I think that if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly in Springfield right now, it seems like there has been a gelling, if you will. I mean, the jello is not totally solidified yet, but it seems that there is kind of a coagulation and a gelling occurring with regards to the governance aspect of things. It appears to me that that's kind of out there, and that was not addressed in our area, and rightfully and appropriately so. But there is continued reference in our legislation about the fact that that is going to be the case, that the structure is going to kind of remain intact, if you will. We know that the body, this body in particular, could be, the RTA board, it could be the MMA, it could be the Mickey Mouse Club, it could be whatever name is appropriate and whatever name comes up for that. But it appears that there is a strong effort to bring a lot more authority and opportunity, therefore, for us to move forward in a stronger, collaborative, more directed manner by this body. And I appreciate that very much. I think we've talked before. We believe that that is what is necessary. So here comes kind of the $64 question, I guess. be careful what you ask for. So are we, as an RTA board or an MMA board or whatever that might be, are we prepared, do you believe, to move forward and capably address all elements that we are outlining in the legislation?
Yes. Yes, I believe we have. I mean, staff have spent a lot of time talking, and we've had these conversations a lot with you over the past months about, I think, two things: clarifying sort of the role and responsibilities of the RTA, and then those expanded areas, but expanded areas into those, essentially those three new buckets that we've been talking a lot about. And we have spent a lot of time thinking, talking about that, and then using those conversations to sort of influence in the conversation that we've had on how do we develop and define this, what this draft language could look like.
One of the things that I'm kind of concerned about, I guess, and I want to make sure that we are fully prepared is, are we going to have the personnel? Do we have the personnel to be able to manage the larger effort which is outlined?
Yeah, I feel like we do. I think that there's, as we get through in the very practical nature of implementing aspects of this, do some responsibilities from the service boards end up, you know, working with us on some of this? That could be the case, but I don't see this as a significant staffing growth. It's responsibilities that we sort of engage in some respects, we engage in a lot of this already, but we don't have the, you know, the authority is really not vested in the board to really act on some of these things. So I would sort of say that we are doing a lot of this work, but on the sidelines to some extent. And so I think I do not envision any of this as a significant growth in staffing at the RTA level.
I appreciate that. I do believe that it will be positive in the future should this proposed legislation be adopted eventually. And I know that the funding elements of this are still, you know, that's way over here yet. And it's going to be approached. But I do believe that it will be very helpful if, in fact, the legislation as it is proposed is adopted, for us to be able to work on some of these things in a very strong planning methodology as well. So I would look forward to be able to have those conversations at board meetings so that we can engage in a strongly collaborative manner with the staff. And one of the reasons that I think that's important is because we are going out to constituencies, all of us, and we are talking to people. We are promoting this, if you will. We are going through a huge campaign process, but it also is a campaign process by each one of us here to talk to our constituent groups and help them to understand the import here and how we anticipate to be able to move forward and truly do a better job, because that's what we're being asked to do, a better job of providing direction and vision and completion or accomplishment of major growth and development within the transit system. So I just think that it's really going to be very, very important if we, in our future effort, make sure that we have those types of conversations here with the staff.
Yeah, I agree. And if I could add one comment, that your question as to capacity, I think is a great question in the sense that we've made that commitment to members of the General Assembly as well. We're not, as Leanne sort of mentioned, we're not putting forth anything that we don't think we have the capacity to deliver on. And frankly, it's been much more of participating in those processes already, but not having that sort of final ability to close the gap when it comes to implementation sometimes. One other thing I'll just note, because it's important context as everyone takes a look at this, we felt it was important, and we've been asked to put forth a vision of how we think this system could be improved. And we have captured what we think those key improvements are. We think they're measured. We think they, while changes from the status quo are limited to some of those reform areas that we think are most critical. But I just want to caution everyone that this is our proposal, And there is, all the analogies we hear about sausage making, we have to remember that there's a meat grinder involved in that too. So things are going to go in and they're going to come out a little bit differently than when they go in. So it's important though, I think for the record that we put out that vision. And if the General Assembly and others choose to go in a different direction, that's a choice that, they have to make. But we want to be clear from even a historical perspective, how we think it should have, or how we think it should be, these reforms should be reflected in legislative language. And so that will change undoubtedly. But I just wanted to remind everyone that we shouldn't, gauge success necessarily in terms of how much fidelity we have to these words at the end of the session, but more importantly, how many of the key principles we're pushing are reflected in the legislation ultimately.
I absolutely understand that, and I realize that this is a moment in time where we're trying to work collaboratively with the legislature to develop whatever the document's going to be in the end. But I do appreciate the forthrightness of the document that's been presented to us, very much so. So the question that I guess I have is, in your mind right now, what do you think the status of this is in terms of a general acceptance out there? You're the man.
Remember, Rob, these
Yeah.
meetings are recorded.
I
So
know.
we're going to come back in 3 months and see what you said.
Yeah, maybe I should shift to sports betting or something. Look, I do feel confident that there's going to be a resolution to some of the key issues that we're confronting, and I do think that the comments that you made at the top about sort of settling on certain elements are emerging. Nothing is dead in Springfield, and unforeseen circumstances could happen to change the entire dynamic. I do think we're looking at how to strengthen a regional entity as opposed to consolidation as originally conceived in the MMA. But again, that could change. So I think the mechanics of it are a sort of a bucket of reform and policy changes and potential structural changes in terms of appointments to the various boards. I sort of see that we see that as emerging as one item, and then the funding as a separate item. There's a lot of questions that remain in both of those, but I think that's kind of the basic contours of it. I don't know how to answer your question that I'm predicting, but I think there is a will and an interest to support this system, and hopefully our battle is to push the General Assembly to identify the resources beyond simply closing the fiscal cliff. But that is an open question at this point. I think for those of you that were at the summit, Senator Villalam, I think had a good construction that, it's the work of the folks that support the transit system that's going to take us from fiscal cliff to 771, and then we're going to have to sort of redouble that effort to get from 771 plus. So I think that's the general dynamic that we're in. Again, we have not heard, as we have heard in previous years, let it shrink. We're much more in the mode of what kind of improvements can we get for how much money.
One comment, and then I'll close, if you'd allow me.
Yeah, please.
Again, I want to thank you. I think you've done a remarkable job. I'm very, very grateful for that. I guess my underlying hope is that this body, by consensus, is strongly supportive of the effort that you have made and the amendments that are proposed, and that we are willing to go out as much as possible and to support this approach with the legislature so that we can see that there is going to be a strong, collaborative, collective effort to support staff and to support this particular approach in this session. So I think that it's something that's going to continue to take work by us as well as our staff. So I'm hoping that we have that degree of consensus and frankly, strong applause and appreciation for staff's effort.
Thank you. And I echo your comments. In the end, I don't know who's going to be in charge of the final draft. There's House staff, Senate staff. at some point in time, the governor's office, which is a big kahuna player here, is going to surface. But we have, in addition to Rob, who's done a magnificent job, we have Eric Madeir, who is the former Senate President's legal counsel, as somebody who's working us through this process. He's one of the finest draftspeople I've seen. Not to get into the weeds, but when I look at this 100+ page document, maybe there's 10 pages of new language, so a lot of it is repetition of the statutes that are there. A lot of it is getting, with Rob and Eric Madeir, us into the computer system of the Legislative Reference Bureau, so that on May 29th, at the speed of light, we're in the computer system. But I don't know who's going to be, the keeper. And I watched this carefully as a governor's chief of staff one time, and as a former legislator, and as a former Senate staffer. I always want to know who's got the real draft. But we're as well positioned as we can. It's a process in the end. It's going to come down to a few people. But keep your comments coming to Rob, to me if necessary, and to Leanne, but work through Rob. But we're well positioned, and as well as we can be 6 weeks out, and 6 weeks is eternity. 6 minutes is eternity in the legislature, and you never know what's going to happen. But we're not, I want us to have as much input as possible. I would love it if we were the controllers of the final draft, but we're not on the Senate staff or House staff. But the actual language, when we were months ago, Rob, going, how do you put our ideas to paper, have started, and they've galvanized pretty well. But it's a fluid process, and everybody's got everybody's phone numbers and emails, and hopefully, Rob, we have as much input into the real final draft as possible. Labor has their own proposal that's out there. They have very, very, I know who's sort of in charge of their operation, and those are as good a people as you're going to find, and they know the process well. But I view labor as our allies in all of this. We're going to have some real discussion over police force, because in the labor bill, they want to make the RTA the policeman. And listening to the gentleman from Washington, D.C. on the safety issue, he talked about how many police they put down in their system. We did have this is why we have these summit meetings. Somebody from our audience goes, I'm not sure we want all these police. Chicago's a little different in terms of their view historically, especially among some of our writers as to how they view the Chicago PD. But they put massive numbers of police on the system, physical police officers in DC, and one of the audience members we had pushed back on that, saying, we don't want that. We want more ambassadors. We want more mental health workers, counselors, and what worked in Washington in terms of a real big physical police presence might be viewed by some here in Chicago as not the way to go. I watch New York very carefully, and again, New York has so many more real police officers on their system than we do here. And you've heard me say it before, I don't subscribe to this, but the governor put the National Guard in the subways in New York City, and she also has actual riders after dark, real police officers on many, if not all, of the subway trains. We don't have that kind of manpower or woman power here in Chicago, but we're well positioned, and it's going to be an odyssey. I don't believe in horoscopes, but I looked at mine today, and it said, and it used the term 6 weeks in my horoscope, which was, like the Twilight Zone, right? So if you look at the Tribune today, Gemini, I'm a Gemini. That's why I get along with everybody. is over the next 6 weeks, it is important to strategize. And it was like it was written, for me. It was like clairvoyant, it was like the Twilight Zone. But over the next 6 weeks, we all have a lot of work to do and we have to strategize, and we will get the job done. The one really good thing, Dr. Sager, and to all of you, is having lived through, this is probably and I'm old, my third machination of major issues dealing with transportation in the legislature. The legislature understands the importance of mass transit. That is a huge difference from the other two crises I've seen. So the legislature understands mass transit is critical to our economy, critical to us being a world-class region. And that's a huge change from the others. But as I closed out that RTA summit, as Tina always reminds me, if we don't solve this crisis, this is so different than the other couple that I've seen, where we're talking 40 or 50% service cuts. We've never seen anything this cataclysmic or this big before in terms of a crisis in mass transit. So this is the biggest I've ever seen in my career. But the beauty is the legislature, I think, to a T, knows that mass transit's really important. And that's a huge starting point from other times I've seen crises of mass transit in the General Assembly. So thank you very much. Other questions or comments for Rob? I know he's been trying to talk to most of you. Yes, Director Mondero.
Thank you, Chairman. Want to compliment Rob. I don't think when I was at the summit, I observed Rob never left the side of Senator Villavalem, and he just kept saying like fund transit, fund transit. And by the time that Ram left, he was repeating what Rob said. So great job in that. As I mentioned at last month's board meeting, just making that request again, that to the extent that the board can go to Springfield, whatever timing that you think that might be, Rob, this is a really crucial, critical time. I also note that in our bylaws that, we can convene, the chairman can convene a special meeting within his 48 hours. Right. So I just don't want us to think that, oh, we have this cadence of a monthly meeting. If there is like hot and heavy legislation that's going to impact the governance of the RTA and you want to get all of us together, don't be like, oh, this is how we always do it. We've got a monthly meeting. I've got to wait. I'd like for you to like involve us so that we can understand the implications on our service areas, the transit boards, and on the governance of the RTA, which is what we are responsible for. So thank you, but great advocacy.
Thank you, Dennis, and I really appreciate your all of you, especially the new city members, how engaged you are. So keep it coming. Thank you very much. Dr. Koterick, speaking of city members.
Thanks, Chairman, and appreciate your comments and the horoscope and what's coming down the line. And Dr. Sager and Director Mondero agree with all of you. And the two things I think to highlight, the exercises that we talked about on marketing and making sure we have a unified approach. A lot of these are tests for what these new authorities might be. And I think we felt we weren't so totally 100% on board in one singular way on the marketing. And so I think we've got to tighten that up. The second piece is if we're going down and explaining what $1.5 billion is going to deliver specifically to districts, that's service planning. That is what we're talking about bringing to the regional level. So these are real exercises where I think the microscope is on about whether or not we can answer the question that I think Dr. Sager asked is, can we deliver that with what we have today? I think those two very relevant and very immediate items are on the table. So what I'd ask is, again, the same thing Director Mondero has requested is engage us in that. If you need help, if we're missing, a service board on the marketing side, let us know. If we're not getting the data and the information we need to make good service planning decisions by consensus, let us know. I think that really nailing those two exercises is going to be a direct result about whether or not you're going to get the trust and confidence of the General Assembly to get more authority.
We're gonna have to be able to deliver because all our reputations are at stake here. But great discussion and great questions. Things that keep me awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, Brian. Um, Any other questions or comments for Rob? Yes. Hi, Director Ryan.
Just one question. Is there any work being done on, like, obviously, the letter that you can email goes to our legislature up here, but what are we doing to talk to statewide? Because it's going to take all of them to vote for it, so like, is there, it sounds like a lot of this is just concentrated up here to our House and Senate folks. So what are we doing to let the rest of the state know that this is important and we need all of them to vote for it?
Yeah, so we work closely with IPTA, the Illinois Public Transportation Association. We're on the board and in touch with them on both their policy ask and some of their activities on the advocacy front, including a IPTA event last week in Springfield. While transit is the common thread between the two, the needs and the requests of both those two systems are pretty different, and the funding mechanism for downstate is much different than ours. And so while I think we can speak to the value of transit, the combined asks of the two don't necessarily line up. So it's just an important piece to remember. Given the expectation that policies will sort of be dealt with in one bucket and revenue in another, I do think there's some confusion about how those votes line up. So there certainly will be a reform proposal. But the funding proposal, I think, is going to be much more, at this juncture at least, more closely tied up with the budget process. And so we try desperately and diligently to keep on the same page with some of our downstate folks, but the needs and how they're addressed are really different. So beyond that sort of support for public transportation and the need for the state to invest in it, that's been the joint call. But I think as uncertain as our situation may seem, I think theirs is even more uncertain in terms of how they're going to address their challenges. I'm not an expert in their needs, but while they are projecting a shortfall, it's relatively manageable and it's not hitting in the same timetable ours is. And so that, frankly, is a challenge for them to create that urgency on their side. Not to be dismissive of their needs, but we have a lot to do on our side of the ledger. So we're trying to be as supportive as we can, but we have a lot of work to do for us too.
Nora, in the last hearing in Springfield a week ago, the downstate transportation agencies followed us in committee. They do have a different formula, of which is a little richer than ours from Springfield, which I would like. But I think we're starting to get really aligned with our downstate colleagues.
I'm sorry to belabor one other thing, Director Ryan. I certainly speak to downstate members often. So Representative Hoffman, I think, is clearly going to be in the leadership of some of the downstate advocacy. And just as a reminder, all of the major urban downstate centers are represented by Democratic senators, and so we continue to talk to them as well. So I think we understand who those sort of caucus leadership folks are. The policy overlap, I guess I would just suggest, is less of an overlap than some perceptions might lead you to believe.
Representative Hoffman is St. Louis, essentially. We forget that there's 800-some thousand Illinoisans that are part of the St. Louis regional economy. But Jay's, been very much engaged. In fact, I went down to a Blackhawks Blues game a few months ago and very much was looking at the system that came across the Mississippi River, to get to the Enterprise Center or to Busch Stadium in St. Louis, just to see what their system looked like. And Representative Hoffman represents that system. And he's been a good ally, and he's up here in Chicago a lot. Jay's a formidable legislator, with real statewide vision. And he's really helpful. University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, like any Big Ten university, is their mass transit system in Champaign-Urbana is critical, just critical to the university. So you know, hopefully they're singing their tunes to, and I think they are, to their legislators as well. Any other questions? Rob, thank you very, very, very much. Now, Sarah, I tried to get to you earlier.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Directors. I'm Sarah Rubino, Principal Analyst here in the Budget and Treasury Division. This will be a brief update on the 2025 financial results of the service boards now through February. Next slide, please. Looking at the operating deficit performance, all three service boards reported favorable to budget results, while the ADA paratransit budget shortfall has now grown to 2.7 million unfavorable after 2 months. Both revenue and expense levels for CTA remain close to budget thus far, producing a 2.2% favorable result. Metro's favorable result of 18.1 million or 12.2% is driven by lower than budgeted expenses, specifically less spending on outside and professional services generally within Metro's administrative function. Both favorable revenue and expense performance at Pace Suburban Service contributed to their favorable operating deficit of 6.7 million or 14% through February. ADA paratransit operating deficit worsened to 6.3% unfavorable as ridership and purchase transportation expense continued to exceed budget, the same trend we experienced in 2024. RTA's finance team will go into much more detail regarding the 2024 and 2025 ADA budget situation in the next agenda item. And that concludes our presentation. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Sarah? If not, thank you very, very, very much. Let's go on to the granddaddy of issues here recently, and that's 6B, which is 2024 PACE ADA paratransit funding situation. Doug Anderson's here. And it's one we're much more focused on in terms of our lobby effort than ever before. So, well, thank you. Thanks, Doug.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Doug Anderson, Manager of Budgets and Analysis here at the RTA, along with Michael Vandekreek, RTA Director of Mobility Services. This item is a briefing on the $25 million shortfall for the 2024 ADA paratransit operating budget and is for information only. Action will likely be requested at next month's board meeting. Next slide, please. As a reminder, and for our newer board members, the Americans with Disabilities Act requires public transit operators to offer complimentary paratransit service within a 3/4 mile buffer of fixed route at a comparable fare and across comparable hours of service. PACE operates ADA paratransit for the entire region, and it's the second largest system in the United States behind the MTA in New York. RTA certifies individuals for eligibility in the program. The ADA system has 3 options for riders: traditional ADA paratransit, which are the PACE vehicles that offer point-to-point trips. Riders book trips through the PACE call center or online. There are also 2 user subsidy programs, the Taxi Access Program, or TAP, and the Rideshare Access Program, or RAP. Next slide, please. We presented preliminary 2024 ADA results to the RTA board in February. On this slide, we are showing the final results of 2024 ADA paratransit ridership, expenses, and revenues. ADA paratransit ridership in 2024 was 4.9 million, exceeding the 2024 budget by 16% and exceeding the pre-COVID level of 4.3 million rides in 2019. The ADA paratransit budget is unique in that each ride drives incremental expense. As we recover from the pandemic, we are experiencing an uptick in certifications, ride requests, and inflation-related expenses per ride. Increased ridership led to the unfavorable expense performance of $28.6 million shown here, offset by $3 million of favorable revenue, primarily from increased fare collections. These variances combined to increase the funding requirement for 2024 by $25.5 million, or around 10%. Next slide, please. Some background on the different types of ADA services offered in the region as PACE implements RTA's 2021 ADA Paratransit Innovation Study, which sought to find ways to mitigate the increasing costs of providing this critical service, required by the ADA of 1990, while also improving rider experience. The new service introduced last year is the Rideshare Access Program, or RAP, a successful innovation, achieving a much lower cost per trip than traditional ADA service, while giving riders freedom to book a trip in real time. The RAP service uses transportation network companies to provide trips within the ADA paratransit service areas of the entire RTA region for those ADA certified customers who are able to utilize vehicles with fewer accommodations. The concept is similar to the existing Taxi Access Program, or TAP, which provides service within the city of Chicago only. Both TAP and RAP are intended to divert demand away from the much more expensive traditional ADA paratransit service, which utilizes contractual providers, thereby mitigating the overall expense of the ADA paratransit operating budget. Next slide, please. It's important to review the actual 2024 ADA paratransit ridership relative to budget expectations. 2023 ADA ridership, shown in the left column, was right around 4 million, with 1 million attributable to the existing Taxi Access Program and 3 million from traditional ADA service. The adopted 2024 budget, shown in the middle column, projected that the launch of RAP would produce around 600,000 rides, or 1.6 million when combined with TAP. Importantly, RAP rides were assumed to shift demand away from the more expensive traditional ADA service, which accordingly was budgeted to decrease by around 400,000 rides to 2.6 million. The resulting overall ADA paratransit ridership assumption of 4.2 million reflected an increase of around 5% from 2023, consistent with the ongoing recovery from the pandemic. Actual ridership results in the right column show that TAP and RAP ridership came in only slightly above budget projections at 1.7 million. Traditional ADA 2024 rides did not decrease from 2023, but in fact increased to 3.2 million, exceeding the budget assumption. It was this significant budget miss of traditional ADA ridership which drove 2024 expenses higher. Next slide, please. The RTA determines rider eligibility for ADA paratransit service. The chart shows ADA paratransit certification volume progression from 2019 through 2025. You'll see the sharp drop-off in total eligibles starting in 2021 at the height of the pandemic, a new baseline from 2021 to 2023, and then a sharp increase in total eligibles in 2024. As of the first quarter of 2025, there are 62,000 eligible riders, which is just shy of pre-pandemic levels. Next slide, please. Finally, here's some information on the ADA Paratransit Reserve, which we hold here at the RTA. The reserve was established in 2014 as a mechanism to hold any ADA funding surpluses for future ADA paratransit use. Maintaining this working buffer saves us from having to execute funding amendments every time there's an ADA funding surplus, and provides a first source of funding for future budget shortfalls without impacting the operating funding of CTA, Metra, and PACE suburban service. The reserve currently contains $33.8 million, more than enough to remedy the 2024 shortfall, but likely not enough to also fund the developing 2025 shortfall, which Sarah mentioned in the February financial results. In conclusion, the 2024 ADA paratransit budget shortfall was caused by a variety of factors: an overall upward ridership trend, growing interest in ADA certifications, and continued growth in each of the ADA paratransit ridership modes. We'll be back next month with a recommended course of action to address the 2024 and potential 2025 shortfall. Back to you, Mr. Chairman, for any questions the board may have.
Thanks, Doug. Any questions or comments? Director Ross.
I remember when I came on the board, we talked a lot about trying to drive paratransit eligible people to fixed routes. And I'm just wondering, given the increases here, do we have any way of measuring how many people who would otherwise be eligible for paratransit services are actually using fixed route. So are overall numbers going up or just the paratransit element of it?
What we do know right now is that there is an increase in people that are requesting ADA paratransit certification. And a lot of those people are people that have an interest in the RAP program. What that tells me is that there is a lot of people that have disabilities that were using fixed route and now are interested because there is a more convenient way to use paratransit service. So I think there's always been a pool of people who use ADA, use fixed route service. In terms of knowing how many people we're bringing from paratransit back to fixed route, that's really a difficult thing to see because we can track ridership on the fixed route system through, tapping of Ventra cards, but it's not really the same type of payment system on ADA paratransit. So it's really not easy to track in that way. We do still have a travel training program that we are using to try to help people understand how to use fixed route with the hope that those folks do transition to regular fixed route service.
So I guess my real question is there anything else we can do to effectively drive people to fixed route? I mean, I know we've had the all stations access improvement here in the city, a lot of great improvements there. There are out in the communities also, I see more handicap accessible sidewalks in Joliet close to the train station. So I know some of those things are happening, but that's our most cost-effective way to move people is fixed route, right? So are there any other things we can do, I guess, to drive that?
Well, I think promotion for sure is one way that we can do that, continuing to promote, the accessibility of fixed route. We have mobility outreach coordinators that are out in the community that are doing presentations at all the organizations that serve people with disabilities and seniors. And a lot of that presentation is promoting fixed route and talking about the accessibility of the system. We could do more of that for sure. I think it just takes more staff to do that. And then there's other advertising we could do to try to promote the accessibility of the system. I think CTA has done a really good job though of really promoting the All Stations Accessibility Project. That's really a topic that they highlight. So more work in that area too. I think one of the challenges also is that, this is a civil right, so people, we can't force people to use fixed route. It really is something that if they feel they can't take that trip that day on on fixed route, that they do have that option to use, the ADA service.
Yeah, fully understand. I'm not suggesting that we
Yeah.
that we take away any rights. I'm just asking if there is a more cost-efficient way to encourage people to use the fixed route.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good questions.
Director Mondero.
Echoing what Director Ross said, I agree that we don't want to take away anyone's rights, but I would love to see those metrics from Ventra, right? If you say that we could get it for Ventra, like what are the number of disabled riders who are riding it, that I think it should be going up and should be trending along with the number for the people on the ADA paratransit one.
We don't have, well, no, I might have not been understood correctly. We don't have any metrics within the Ventra system to say who has a disability. We could track the usage of our reduced fare permits, and that would capture, some of the riders that are in our reduced fare program, but it's hard to say if those same people that are in reduced fare are also using ADA paratransit. So it's really a difficult comparison to make, but we can track how many people with reduced fare might be tapping on the system.
Good thought. Director Carey.
So I want to talk a little bit about PACE's budgeting for this year. Well, the overrun for last year, the 25.5 million, when they budget ridership, is there a line item, and I should know this, I don't remember, how much they expect traditional ADA paratransit versus TAP and RAP? Do they have separate line items for each of those? And if so, was the biggest increase in the TAP and RAP?
I don't, they do budget at the line item, certainly. I don't have those numbers in front of me, so I can't answer that question right now, but I will follow up with you on that.
And I don't think that the biggest increase is just RAP. I think that RAP though is emerging and it's growing as
Okay.
time goes on. So I think it's more to be seen, in the future, what's going to happen there. I definitely know that there's an interest in RAP because it is a really convenient way to use ADA paratransit service. It's more user-friendly for sure. So I think that time will tell, if this program will become the most expensive way to use paratransit. But, if we go back to the slide that has like the charts comparing if you go back like, I think 2 slides. If you don't mind. Yeah, one more there. So in the actuals, the argument that PACE has, which is very true, if those 3.2 million people or those 1.6 million people were using traditional service, the cost of the service would be much more. So we are diverting, some cost to RAP through RAP and TAP. $70 a ride for traditional service as opposed to $19 or $25 rides for the RAP and TAP programs.
Okay. Okay, I just think an analysis of where the biggest increase is, where is it, where is PACE not? I mean, when we look at their budgeting for this year, they're already in 2 months, they're almost 2 million over. So what did they not, what did they not realize, or what did we not realize when we were looking at their budget, that it was just going to be exceeded again?
Well, I think
Trying to understand where the increase is.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
we
think
can do
the Doug kind of made the point. I mean, the program is just growing as a whole, both in terms of eligible participants, people being eligible and registering for the program. So that just number of participants is growing across. And so, but I mean, we're looking at just humans and rides versus cost, because, the lion's share of the ridership growth is actually still on the fixed and the cost on the fixed, sort of the traditional, sorry, I should say, the traditional ADA paratransits. We are seeing growth. I mean, you can see the splits across them there, I think, but the driver of the cost is on the fixed route side. And I think something to note that new contracts went into place in 2024 for the fixed route providers. So that was that's part of it, that captures some of the increase, because like everything else, inflation costs, those contract costs went up. So the individual unit cost of providing that trip kind of from the contractor side went up. And when you add volume on top of that, it's growing at a faster rate than even I think PACE anticipated. And I think it's a conversation we've had with PACE, and we recognize that we probably have to do a better job of forecasting and sort of planning ahead for this. But I think the practical reality is sort of the sustainability and the ability to fund all of this is challenging right now.
Okay. And I understand the increase well, at one point you mentioned we've got some new riders that are taking advantages because the RAP system, because it's more convenient. But at the same time, so you've got that increase, but we want people to take RAP or TAP, not take the traditional. So
That's correct.
it's, I mean, it's a balancing act, but
Absolutely.
got to kind of figure out. So should we be promoting RAP and TAP much more heavily than the traditional, and steering people towards it?
Well, and I think that's, I mean, to go back in the history of the program too, I mean, TAP existed, taxi access in the city existed before. The RTA with PACE in the pandemic did an analysis study and looked around the country as to what other creative models could be implemented out there. And this was one of the recommendations. Then PACE implemented the RAP concept on a pilot basis in DuPage, and then expanded it across the region. And the cost differential is, huge. I mean, it's, $73 versus 26, I think it is on the RAP side. And so we do want to do that. The other thing that PACE did was implement a lower fare initially on the RAP side, because we were trying to we can't force anyone. They have to self-elect to choose RAP versus ADA, because that's kind of the baseline sort of service, fundamental service that's kind of the core of the program. They can elect to take RAP, but we wanted to incent people to move over. So I think there's a host of part of the ongoing conversation beyond the financial side is some of these broader programmatic conversations that we're continuing to have with PACE, could we, put some program changes in place that might manage and maybe continue to incent people to move to the more cost-effective modes, but maybe have some programmatic other changes. I mean, there's been a long-term conversation around like broader policy question beyond the investment, the capital investment into accessibility to mainline. Peers around the country in some cases have implemented free rides for anyone who's ADA eligible across all fixed routes. So there becomes an incentive also to move to a fixed route service, or use paratransit for shorter trips to access fixed route, that kind of thing. So I think they're all things that are on the table as we continue to look at these programs going forward. We've got sort of this immediate budgetary issue that we do have to deal with.
Right. Okay. Well, I look forward to your research.
More to come.
Because, before we get to the budget again for next year. So then going to the shortfall, we can use, most of the reserve to cover that. But then what do we do for this year?
That's the big question.
There's 33 million in the reserve. So if the board approves using that for 2024 shortfall of 25 million, there'll be 8 million left. And PACE's shortfall for 2025 is on track to exceed that. So it could help part of 2025, but there needs to be another solution, which we're discussing.
So the monies have to be found because I think, as everyone understands, essentially those monies come off the top. They'd have to be probably a budget revision ultimately, and we would have to identify where those monies would come from.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Director Quintero.
Thank you, Chairman. If I remember right, a couple months ago, there was an action plan that PACE submitted to us. Did the action plan have any recommendations to change, or was the recommendation solely to fund this through the reserve fund?
It was the latter.
So I think first we should probably early in this process put requirements in the action plan to have actions, and really do that in a collaborative way. During the budget hearings, we had raised whether or not Medicaid reimbursement for medical trips was a possibility. I think that was sort of dismissed, probably without some good analysis and some cost and benefits of whether or not that helps. The second piece that I'd encourage everyone to think about as we come up with recommendations is, this is about mobility and, trips and using things and getting around easier. So that's good, and those services, particularly in the collar counties, as Director Yonan often brings out, working with the counties, there's a lot of different dial-a-ride services through county services, through townships, many of which I'm sure cross into the jurisdiction where you are eligible for RAP. So is there a holistic solution where we can partner with those groups? I don't know if we're seeing some of the rides coming from them because this is more convenient, but it's probably worth drilling down to see all of the other sort of, convenient, pick up the phone, I need to go somewhere. Everyone in that business should make it as easy as possible for everyone who's eligible to use them. And I know that's currently not the state. This might be a good sort of mechanism to force that conversation as we're talking about changing things.
They're all really good points. Just one note to, as a region, we have the Human Services Transportation Plan, which captures and sort of works with, attempts to coordinate across all the sort of, there used to be a lot of township, there's still some township, but they're mostly been rolled up to the county level. We actually, I mentioned at the top end of my report, the 5310 monies, we actually end up tapping a lot of the 5310 type monies, funding lines go to the counties to support those programs. And there has been a lot more sort of consolidation over the years into sort of more regional programs, and then better coordination amongst those programs with PACE as it relates to dispatching and sort of integration and coordination of services. Is it perfect? No. Could there be more? Yes. Funding always becomes part of the challenge, but I think that there has been a lot of progress, and that's why we maintain this Human Services Transportation Plan, which not just the counties and sort of the locals participating, but the service boards are at the table. So there is that kind of ongoing opportunity to better integrate and coordinate.
That's a great point, Leanne. And the more that we can use our funding as a carrot to incentivize that type of, uniformity and ease of use and across the region, we should really think strategically about how to make that a more explicit outcome of the 5310 and other sources that we have for it.
Excellent. Dr. Sagar.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I do want to kind of reiterate what Director Kotarek said. I think there's a tendency, because of our concern of the finances, that this is a challenge. It's a really bad thing. But we have to keep in mind that this is what we're here for. This is our service. And the fact that the numbers are increasing, I think, speaks incredibly well for the system and for the fact that people are aware that they do have options and opportunities for mobility. And that's the right thing to do. And so the right is not always easy, but it's certainly a good thing. So we want to keep that in mind. I also know that this is a kind of a multifaceted type of effort that we're going to have to undergo. I mean, we all know that, we're $400 million short in terms of the free and shared, or the free and reduced fare system from the state, and that impacts how we operate and how we're going to budget on things. But I do agree 100% that this is a perfect opportunity for us to partner with local units of government. And there's a lot of effort, and I'm proud to say I think McHenry County has done a pretty fine job in terms of its McRide program, but also our expansion into use of Uber, and we are paying for that. But the counties are willing to do that because it's our residents and our constituents. And so I think we need to collaborate in those efforts. And I know that there's various capacity for counties or local units of governments to do that, but it's certainly an important element that we need to address in a strongly collaborative manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leanne, maybe this is a question of naivete, but I think Director Kotarek raised it, and I heard a note this morning on the news that one of the unique quirks of our state is that we've got more local units of government than any other state that surrounds us. So as it relates to transportation, my question is there something that we do where we actually organize or coordinate, as Dr. Sagar was saying, what happens in the other local areas to make sure we've got an overall strategic game plan relative to that coordination? Is there some formal mechanism that exists now? Because we haven't talked about it very much here at the board, and I'm just curious more so than anything else.
Yeah, I just mentioned the Human Services Transportation Plan is that plan for the entire region that began very much as even just identifying all these different kinds of services and then working towards a longer term and strategic strategy on how we continue to support and sustain, not just at the RTA level, but at the local level as well. What's the sustainability of all these programs, which has resulted, as I mentioned, this sort of consolidation in many respects from many of these local programs into county-wide programs. So there's a coordinated dispatch, and then funds and resources can be pooled to provide better coverage, better service across entire counties. MC Ride is one of those examples. DuPage County were led sort of their own county-wide consolidation. Will has done the same thing. So these are models around the region that have, and it's been led by what the RTA has done through the Human Services Transportation Plan. And that's been, it's been working for, gosh, more than a decade. And it takes time. Some of it was capital investment to coordinate and consolidate dispatch center, that kind of work. But then pooling and leveraging scale, if you will, out of all these sort of smaller, either municipal or township-based services to get to some of these county region-wide models that we've had. So I think there's been good success, and we update the Human Services Transportation Plan every 5 years. Is it every 5 years? Yes. It's been a while since I actually used to lead that work. So it is work that's ongoing, and it is a continued goal that we have to continue to do more of that and provide that efficiency.
It would be interesting to know what that number is, because that number has to be funded. It's not funded through the funds that we have access to, but it'd be just interesting to know how much is being spent in that arena, in addition to what we're asking for funding for public transportation throughout the region and throughout the state.
Yeah, we can share with you the latest it's all on the website, but we can share with you the latest human services transportation plan, kind of a summary of what the 5310 monies are year over year, and sort of where those monies are going.
And the communities have a local match too, so it's not just all our money as well, or the federal money.
Any other questions on ADA? Got to get the state to do more than its 4% of our $250 million cost. And then Rob, in the back, one of the things when we're putting together our lobby effort, we clearly need to work with the disability communities in Illinois, including the fact that what's missed here, if there were ever the doomsday or horrible scenarios of having to make these service cuts, there are laws with respect to where we must provide the ADA paratransit service. Many of those service areas will be left out in the cold. So that's, Rob, I think we need to let the disability community know that if some of the service cuts had to be made at a level of 40 to 50%, it's going to affect who's eligible for paratransit. I mean, those are life-saving or, life-changing episodes if we were to face those draconian cuts. Tina?
Yeah, I just want to comment on that really quickly. I'm working with Doug Sullivan, who initiated this, much to his credit, to develop.
Doug Sullivan from PACE.
I'm sorry, thank you. Doug Sullivan from PACE, yes, in the Government Affairs and External Communications team at PACE, to work on a more of a word of mouth and for paratransit drivers, not so much ads on TV, but physical flyers that we can use to communicate the Save Transit Now campaign to the disability community, because the point you just made, Chairman Dillard, obviously the impact to that community would be huge. And this is a community that's frankly used to having to reach out to legislators to get their needs met.
And legislators, they are a very sympathetic audience for legislators, as they should be. But this is, if that were to happen, that's just, it throws these folks' lives into complete turmoil. So it's just an extra advocacy group that we need to really engage and warn them that, these things, as I said at the conclusion of the summit, this is real, folks. This is not a threat. These are real situations that we're facing.
And I'll just add that Commissioner Rachel Arfa is a really good partner of ours. She sits on the PACE board, of course, and so she is very aware. And she also sits on the RTA Citizens Advisory Board. And of course, she's the commissioner of the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. So we do have a good partner there.
Great. Anything else on ADA paratransit? Okay, let's move on to 7A, which is an ordinance authorizing long-term borrowing. Kevin, I think this one is yours. I know Allison is out there as our legal counsel who perhaps can answer any questions on the long-term borrowing here, but long history on this item. Kevin, it's yours.
Thank you, Chair Diller and members of the board. So this is Kevin Bueso, RTA CFO. And with me virtually, I have Vincent McCarley with Backstrom, our financial advisors, as well as Randy Rampola with Barnes and Thornburg, and they are our bond counsel. And if we need to get technical, I do have our treasurer, Bill Ackman, here in person as well. So I'm sure when you have the tough questions, he'll be happy to answer those. So just a little bit of background on this item. This goes back to 2019. There was an agreement between the RTA and the service boards to issue $130 million bond, a general obligation bond. And this was in lieu of Metra taking a higher portion of the 2020 through 2024 Illinois bonds and PAYGO funds. So again, this is one of those tools that we as the RTA can use to negotiate with the service boards. So I like to emphasize that having these the opportunities to discuss these kind of items at a regional level. I was not part of that conversation in 2019, so I do have the easy part of saying I was not in the room, but I know that these are, but I know that these kind of conversations and negotiations are important for us to maintain a good relationship amongst all of us, right, and have that regional view. Please also note that this bond issue has been postponed for several years by Metra. So some of it is because they have been tapping a lot of the other capital funds that have come to the region. So they've been good stewards of that funding, being able to use that, whether it was federal or state funds that were coming to the region for these capital plans. Now, of course, this is timing in terms of issuing it now, especially with the macroeconomic factors that we're seeing. We do realize that a lot of times when the stock market is going bananas like it is right now, this presents a safe haven for investors and provides a good opportunity for us. So again, next slide, please. Since it has been a while since we've issued that, we wanted to give just a general explanation of where we are in terms of our debt portfolio. So the RTA currently has 13 outstanding bonds with principal amount totaling just under $1.1 billion. And we have outlined that funding under the skip bonds. $600 million is the outstanding principal right now. And then non-skip bonds. So under the RTA general authority, we have $468 million. Just to the $600 million, to explain a little bit more about that, that's the Strategic Capital Improvement Program. And that was in collaboration with the state. These bonds were issued back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so the state helps with covering the debt service on that. So the interest cost is covered by the state. Obviously, under the general authority of the RTA, under the 800 limit that we have, the state doesn't cover the interest costs under that umbrella. I'll also, again, providing a little bit of background in terms of the restrictions on the amount of debt that the RTA can issue. So as I mentioned, we have a limit of $800 million that excludes the $1.8 billion that was authorized back in the 90s, 2000. Therefore, now the RTA can issue only new money. We have that 468. So the RTA has room of about $330 million to be able to issue general obligation bonds. The RTA Act also limits short-term debt to $100 million, and right now we don't have any outstanding short-term debt. One other item that limits our ability to issue debt, and this is it's included in our bond ordinance, as well as the financial markets look at this, is our ability to cover our debt, right? So how much sales tax we get and how much it can cover. In general, the rule is 2.5 times the projected debt service. Right now, we're at 9.5 times, so we're well covered in that regard. And it was actually a positive. I mean, it's a positive factor when it looks at the rating of our GO bonds. Next slide, please. Under the projects that this bonding is financing, it's important to highlight that these projects, beyond moving some of the capital needs that Metro has presented in the past, and we all know that Mr. Dewinski has been very open about how big that capital need is on their side and as a region as well. It presents a good investment opportunity right here within the city of Chicago as well. So, for example, the $25.3 million for for the purchase of the battery electric locomotives will be used for the UP North line and will allow Metro to provide a 30-minute service to close-in stations like Ravenswood, the New Peterson Ridge, and Rogers Park stations. The $34 million for the purchase of manufactured diesel locomotives will provide service on many lines connecting downtown Chicago to the suburbs. The $22.9 million for the replacement of the roof and upgrade of the HPA system at Western Avenue. It's in the Milwaukee district. This facility is located within the west side of the city. And then we have the $12 million for the midlife rehabilitation. Bi-level trailer and cab cars will provide service connecting Chicago to the suburbs. And then finally, we have the $12 million for the replacement and expansion of the Jackson substation on the Metro Electric line. This investment will allow additional service on the Metro Electric line, which serves the south side. Again, beyond this impact on capital, we have the positive economic impact on the region in terms of well-paid union jobs and contractual work that's going to be put out there. So again, incentivizing the economy within the region as well. Next slide, please. The plan of finance for the 2025 A bonds, as I mentioned, we're looking for net proceeds of the bond issuance to net $130 million. This bond will amortize over the next 30 years with an estimated annual debt service of about $8.5 million. And that amount will depend on the final bids. The RTA is required to sell all long-term debt in a competitive way. So the winning bid will be the one that offers the true interest cost, or TIC. The RTA 2025 bond will be a tax-exempt bond, so it allows for lower interest payments. We also had, under the leading pool of participants or in this issuance, we have, our Treasurer, Bill Ackman, has been the engine behind strategizing, presenting, and putting a lot of these documents together for us and having the presentations to the rating agencies. The rating agencies commended his work as well for how comprehensive he was in covering a lot of the items that they were looking for. And again, we have bond counsel, our financial advisors, as well as RTA staff, including general counsel, to work all together. And out of these, except for the rating agencies, the work was all competitively bid through the procurement process that we have here at the RTA. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So again, as I mentioned last week, we did present our financial plan to the rating agencies, Fitch and Standard & Poor's. Today, we're seeking the approval to issue the bonds. Next week, we expect to hear, in fact, tomorrow, I believe we're expected to hear verbal communication in terms of the rating from one of the rating agencies. And then next week, have that all finalized in terms of the ratings that we're going to get. We plan to sell the bonds in 2 weeks. As I mentioned, it will be a competitive sale, so the bonds will be sold to the lowest bidder. We will present the results of the sale on the May 17th board meeting. So at that time, we'll have the number of bidders, the range, and the winning underwriter as well. At this time, this concludes my presentation, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. Will you make sure I get and see the ratings that we receive? I always like outside professional input as to how we're doing.
Yeah, and just a reminder, we're prime investment grade. We're AA plus in the scheme of the rating, and that was just affirmed by Fitch. And so Bill was good enough to include this information for me to share with the board. August 23rd, Fitch affirmed the rating of AA plus. And then on September 9th of 2021, S&P affirmed the AA rating as well. And we did have this conversation with, we did get some preliminary information yesterday in terms of setting expectations that right now, with all the different things that are happening, the RTA presents a great investment opportunity. However, we are part of the state of Illinois and the general area that presents several challenges for us to get an upgrade to a AAA rating.
I always tell people the rating we have is as high as you're going to get because there is an Illinois penalty when you are out there trying to issue bonds. It's gotten better as the state has really paid down some of its backlog of bills, but literally there is an Illinois penalty, as Barnes and Thornburg, I think, will tell you, just from being in the state of Illinois, you get penalized. Getting better, but we essentially have a perfect credit rating, as high as we're going to get. And in a state like Illinois, that's something to brag about.
I always think, excuse me, I always think about it like, you know, if you relate it to your personal rating, right? If you're within that 780 to 820 range, that's where we are. And whether you are moving within that range, you know, not a whole lot can change in terms of the interest costs you're going to pay.
Right. Director Groven.
Yeah, maybe more of a comment or a confirmation from our conversation yesterday, Kevin. As we take on this 130 million, as we issue this additional debt, it takes us up to 75% of our limit.
Correct.
And confirm this for me. I think yesterday you said most of the outstanding debt will be retired by 2030 or 31. So we've got a few years and then we're going to be back to a position of much more capacity.
That is correct. And as I mentioned during our conversation, 2031, that our debt sort of ratio goes to 58% or something like that. And then I still think that, thank you for reminding me, this punts the conversation of having a long-term outlook in terms of what our debt portfolio should look like. And that will be a conversation coming to our board here so that we have a general idea of what our general obligation bonds outstanding should be at all times, because I don't think, you know, that's healthy to go from 75 to 58 to 20 to 8%, and then having to, you know, that provides a financial planning nightmare. So we'd love to come back and work with our financial advisors and our treasurer to provide a proposal that would sort of level what's an acceptable range. And of course, that includes making sure that we have the requirements that are appropriate for the service boards in order to finance what capital projects they need to fund through this program. It's a tool within our toolbox for sure. Hopefully that answered your question. I went a little longer than what I needed to.
And I want to point out, even though this is Metra primarily, a lot of these are City of Chicago projects, and it just accentuates what some people don't understand is that Metra has a significant presence, including the number of stations they have in the City of Chicago. And this is part of a longer range plan where the CTA benefited substantially a couple of years ago in this process. Leanne remembers the negotiating standpoints very well. So any other questions or comments? Dr. Sager?
Not a question, but I have, as board will probably recall, asked more than once why Metro hasn't taken advantage of bonding to a great extent. And I think that it is a positive mood right now. So I'm grateful for this and support it strongly.
Me too, as a guy that rides in a car that was delivered when Dwight Eisenhower was president. Every now and then you should take on some long-term.
And I'll just add to that point. Metra actually is actively looking at that. They're also actively looking at leveraging federal low interest rate loans for their programs as well. Specifically as it relates to this, it's a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of issuing debt, it's a small amount. And since Metra itself independently hasn't been in the market, it was financially determined to be better that the RTA also move forward with this. We're a known commodity in the marketplace, and so ultimately it's cheaper for the region to be doing it this way than for Metra to try to do it on a relatively small package.
The timing's good as my 401k temporarily goes to hell. This becomes a very good investment alternative over the next month. So timing is everything. Director Kotarian.
Thanks for bringing up the TIFIA and the US DOT loans. Was that an option that we considered for this issuance?
Not for these projects. I mean, they are looking at it for packages of other projects around their bridge work, and a couple of other things that are sort of longer, bigger and longer term projects.
Those projects are more in the billions, the ones that they're looking to do that. And that's why, again, this, in the bigger scheme of things, it's a very small issuance, 130 million. Not a plug for Loop Capital and not trying to get Backstrom to to go back and sharpen their pencil or anything like that. But they did provide me with a list of issuances, recent issuances. So we got New York at 1.8 billion. We have City of Los Angeles Airport at 1.5 billion. There are at the same time that we are doing this. So when you're looking at these as small numbers.
We are really teeny.
Yeah, at least with these issues.
You mentioned Loop Capital. Are they involved in this transaction?
No.
Oh.
No. They just were kind enough to send me a list of some of the deals that they're working on that are coming up, and I thought it would be good to mention them in terms of referencing. Yeah.
Director Mondero.
Kevin, how much do you expect like the annual interest rate payments would be? How much additional, and where would that be paid out of?
So it's 8.5 million annual debt service. We're estimating to come in just under 5% in interest cost. And then what it's coming off is the sales tax, and it's coming off the top. So in terms of priority for even for operations is GO bonds, debt service payment comes off first, and then operations is just how things work.
Okay, and then you mentioned that we are fine investment grade, AA plus with Fitch, AA with S&P, but then the ratings, we would receive them April 21st. So what would your expected ratings that you think will?
Yeah, right now the general and maybe Backstrom can help on these, but we're expecting to maintain it with a positive outlook. That's sort of our best case scenario at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Director Carey.
I remember discussing this when we were doing the budget for this year. We said it might happen. Did we build it in the budget, or we said we'd handle it through a budget amendment?
No, so it's actually been a line item in the budget since 2019 when we first negotiated the whole deal on the heels of Rebuild Illinois, which was the state's capital program. So it's been carried forward in the budget every year since. Last year, when we put the budget together, it was a specific line item in there. We did flag it. We did talk about it with the board. So the point being that it was actually going to be in this year's program and moving forward. So sort of the conversation was, we're going to advance this this year, and with that approval from the board was the direction, gave staff essentially the direction to go down the path of bringing on bond counsel, the financial advisors, putting the package together, which now we bring back to you before we actually finally issue, and then we also come back and report as to what the final deal ended up looking like.
Okay.
And
that's our standard procedure of how we've always done it when we've issued any debt.
And that's included in our, so as Leanne mentioned, including this year's budget as well as 2026, 2027 budget plans as well.
Okay.
And that's using that, yeah.
Confirming.
Yep.
Director Yonan.
Thank you, Chairman. And, I too, gonna vote in favor and just strongly support this opportunity. When we talk about the fiscal cliff, there's gonna be a lot of folks talking about, well, what are, my districts, what are we gonna get out of it? And I think, these are some great projects that are going to touch the region, some green initiatives here. And, for sure, there's talk of some of these folks saying that perhaps, making some cuts here or there are going to be, coming up with the other transportation agencies that their contractors, consultants are all wondering what kind of work is out there. And I think, these are going to present some great opportunities. I know that Harvey Transportation Center is a big project that is going to really impact a lot of that industry. So I think the timing of this is great because we really want to show that there is projects out there aside from the capital, improvement plans that all our service boards are already working on, to say that we too, are pushing this initiative, everything we can to put projects, people to work and an investment in some green initiatives. So I think this is a great timing and great opportunity to make that a part of our story in Springfield as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anything else on this? If not, how about a motion and a second? We approve it. Director Carey moves that we approve, seconded by Director Yonan. With that, Joey, you want to take the roll call?
Director Carey,
Aye.
Director Colson, Director Gathing,
Aye.
Director Gorman. Aye. Director Groven,
Aye.
Dr. Jenkins,
Aye.
Dr. Katarik,
Aye.
Dr. Lewis,
Yes.
Dr. Mondero,
Yes.
Dr. Pang. Director Rotondo,
Yes.
Director Ross,
Yes.
Director Ryan,
Yes.
Dr. Sagar,
Yes.
Director Yonan,
Aye.
Chairman Dillard,
Yes.
and Director Pang. See her on there, but-
Sarah remembers as well. She was here for the city folks. Sarah was part of this discussion back in the good old days.
Unmute. I'm, yes.
Thank you, Sarah.
15
Good
ayes.
morning.
Sorry.
They're all good days.
I was talking to
Some are just better than others.
15 ayes.
Thank you very much. And so the item in 7A is approved, authorizing the long-term borrowing. Thank you very much. Item 7B is the approval of travel expense reimbursements. Any questions there? If not, how about a motion and a second? Director Rotondo moves, we approve, seconded by Director Groven. And Madam Secretary, take the roll on 7B.
Director Carey,
Aye.
Director Colson, Dr. Gathing,
Aye.
Director Gorman, Dr. Groven,
Aye.
Dr. Jenkins,
Aye.
Dr. Katarik,
Aye.
Dr. Lewis,
Yes.
Dr. Mondero,
Yes.
Dr. Pang,
yes.
Dr. Rotondo,
Yes.
Dr. Ross,
Yes.
Dr. Ryan,
Yes.
Dr. Sagar,
Yes.
Dr. Yonan,
Yes.
and Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
Yeah, 14 ayes.
Thank you. That is approved. Item 8 is new business. Any new business to come before us before we get back together for our May 15th at the 9 a.m. meeting, which is our next. Seeing no new business. With that, how about a motion to adjourn? Director Ryan, you want to make the motion to adjourn? Thank you. Seconded by Director Jenkins. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thank you.